Hey folks, welcome to ADSR. I'm Stephen Ellestad. Make sure you subscribe to the ADSR YouTube channel and follow on social media for great production content every day. In this tutorial, I wanted to talk about mixing for the song, or how do we approach a mix and the creative decision making that goes along with that in a way that really enhances the specific song and makes it better. Not just puts out the parts of the song for the listener to hear, but actually improves upon what's in there in the arrangement and in the elements and parts of the song. One of the first things you just need to think about, I think, with this is, are you mixing towards a specific sound? And just kind of going after ideas because you want to mess with groups, or you want to, try some filter sweeps. That can be cool, but it's not really working towards a specific sound necessarily. And one of the most important things I think you can do, both in terms of the sound of the mix and the individual elements in the mix, is really try to envision what that sound could be in the context of the song, and then work towards that sound that you kind of hear in your head. And then specifically, first thing you need to do is really get a basic balance, a foundation mix, and then work towards bringing out the creative aspects and showcasing like the core elements of the song and of the style. And as you do that, you're going to move through a couple different stages, and you need to have some different kind of creative goals as you work. In the beginning, you're literally just getting things laid out and organized and balanced, and your goal is really just to build a basic foundation and start having some ideas kind of churning in the back of your head about how you can come back at a later time and develop some things to showcase maybe the melody or the hook, or a really cool section, change of texture or something. As we're going through there, we're also kind of just thinking to ourselves, what are the potential problem areas? Or is there frequency masking or buildup? Could there possibly be phase issues? Is it too mono or narrow? Or is it too much stereo and there's all kinds of phase cancellation happening? And so a couple of things that we want to think about is we want to actually have a creative game plan. At least maybe not a specific list of things we're going to do, although that can be helpful, but instead just give it some actual thought to, how am I approaching this mix in a way that really enhances this track and it helps tell the story of the song, whether that story's showcasing the melody or the groove or the rhythm, or maybe it's exposing all the complexities of different textures and layers or changes in that kind of stuff over the course of the piece. There are all ways that we can kind of mix-wise come in and try to enhance and get the composer or the producer's point across, whether it's somebody else or our own track. And going along with that, any creative game plan is really going to start with, what are the most important parts of this song? And it really does vary incredibly, and things that tend to be dance-oriented or groove-oriented, that kick is really, really important. But in many pop things, it's the vocal, or it's both of those two. And you really want to base all of your creative decision-making off of how do we showcase and how do we make sure that that vocal is front and center and really appropriate and for the style. How do we get that kick out there and exposed? Even though we're certainly going to pay attention to other elements of the mix, everything we're making decision-wise is kind of based on how those decisions affect those key important elements of the song. And those important parts might be different from section to section. And so breaking the song down into chunks and having a strategy to, in each section, what is the most important element here and how am I showcasing that? And that kind of leads to right there into showcasing the arrangement. One of the big things mixing can do is really explore parts of a song in space, in depth, front and back, as well as layering different textures and exposing different parts of the arrangement. And so finding ways to think about, how can I showcase the arrangement, and I can really effectively especially sell things like transitions or changes, because that's the things that's most dramatic in most pieces of music. And I'm also, at this point, I'm thinking about, how do I engage the listener? What kind of tricks and what ways can I draw the listener in, manipulate them, kind of get them wanting more, make them feel that drop harder, all those kinds of things. But when we're doing that, one thing we want to think of is, how can we be kind of elegant about that process and be effective in kind of bringing those aspects to the front, but not being like super obvious about it. When the mix elements themselves are so in your face, it can be a distraction. And so all this comes down to, some specific creative mix considerations. And so these are some things I like to specifically think about, just to make sure I'm kind of covering all the bases and hitting creative high points from a mixing perspective. And they all come down to, you've probably heard the saying, mixes should be tall, deep, and wide. They should make a full use of the frequency spectrum. They should make a full use of the stereo field. They should use time-based effects, etc., to put certain elements farther back in the sound field, away from the listener. And at the same time, we also have the whole element of motion and using automation and moving parts and changing parts. By asking ourselves some of these questions, just, we might get a couple of ideas. I certainly don't belabor every single question in every single mix, but these are the types of things that if you're thinking about them as a focus of your process, I think you're going to see some really cool ideas popping up. So when we're thinking about space, the biggest thing again is how do we showcase those key elements, that kick or that vocal? How do the mix elements basically balance and layer? Whether it's like the hi-hats and the different, percussion against, say, pads and chords and vocals and maybe gates and synths and sweeps. How do all these things play off of each other? And then how are we making effective use of space? Do I have things at various places front and back? Do I have things at various places side to side? Am I making the most effective use of that, having the most important things in the most obvious places or the places that are most likely to draw the listener? When I look at the energy side of it, I'm doing a lot of that space stuff in that initial foundation phase of the mix. When I get into the next level, I'm really mostly focusing on how can I really enhance energy and texture and layering. And so I'm thinking to myself, whether it's on a particular track like a kick or maybe the drum group or whatever, how can I add punch? How can I add power? And specifically though, from a bigger picture, how does a song kind of develop and build? So how do the energy levels shift over the course of the song? And how does that energy and that dynamic range kind of help sell the song? How does it help bring that anticipation into the hook? Or how does it really, sell that drop or the breakdown or what have you? And then lastly, a really important area, which is often neglected, is motion. So what types of movement is appropriate? When I'm talking about motion, maybe it's things like panning filters, moving left to right, or maybe it is like stereo delays, doing some ping pong stuff. And sometimes it's literally just parts popping in or out of like the left side or the right side, just in certain sections of the song. Those types of movement of the elements appearing suddenly in specific places can be really effective. We can think about two main types of motion. Some of that motion is like delays and filters, and those are like layers, those are textural elements. And then we look at things like motion of section automation, like how does that, maybe the synths group, maybe some parallel compression comes in the build up into the drop, or maybe background vocals and the horns really build up as we drop into the hook on a big funky hip hop groove. Most importantly though, how can we kind of look at those motion elements and movements from automation, whether it's on a region or an entire track, or it's a section level moving or something? How can that motion really help sell that song and those creative ideas? That's just a whole bunch of kind of ways to think creatively about how you want to approach the mix. I hope that gave you some new ideas and some maybe a new way to think about approaching some stuff. Make sure you subscribe to the ADSR YouTube channel. I'm Stephen Ellestad. Have a great day.